In a tiny village gripped by fear, the local preacher's ghost stories were supposed to keep people in line. But when a real demon showed up, all their prayers were met with a terrifying silence. In a world of monsters and ancient evils, what hope could a simple servant girl possibly have? Well, more than you might think. This is the story of how one young woman, armed with nothing but her wits, saved her home from a terror that had haunted it for generations. The village of Oakhaven lived in constant fear. It wasn't a fear of bandits or starvation, but of spirits, ghouls, and devils. This terror was carefully stoked by one man, Preacher Theron. Every week, he'd stand at his pulpit, his voice thundering as he described the minor demons lurking in the woods and the vengeful ghosts rattling at window panes. His sermons were pure theatre, often helped along by the distant clanking of chains or a sad wail from the back of the church, special effects provided by a paid helper. The villagers, devout and simple, were terrified. They clung to his every word, and their fear made them obedient. But not everyone was buying it. Elara, a servant in the preacher's own house, had a front-row seat to his weekly productions. She was quiet, but her eyes missed nothing. She noticed when the ghastly apparition in the churchyard wore the same beat-up boots as the town blacksmith. She saw the flour dust on the disembodied hand that knocked over the collection plate and knew it belonged to the baker's boy. Elara wasn't impious, but she was frustrated. This fake fear wasn't making people good. It was just making them miserable. They were too scared to walk the roads after dark, too afraid to laugh too loudly, worried they might attract the wrong kind of attention from the spirit world. Oakhaven was a village paralyzed by stories, and Elara's heart ached for the life that had been smothered. One autumn evening, Preacher Theron decided to stage his biggest show yet. He called it a confrontation with the netherworld, promising to banish a spirit he claimed was souring the village's milk. He'd set the scene perfectly. The church was dark, lit by only a few sputtering candles, and his accomplice was hidden in the rafters with a sheet on a string. As Theron began his booming chants, a different kind of chill swept through the church. This wasn't the usual draft from a broken window. This was a deep, biting cold that seemed to rise from the very stones of the floor. The candles flickered, then died, plunging the room into total darkness. A voice, smooth as oil but sharp as broken glass, echoed from the altar. "How amusing," it said. "A little man playing with shadows, pretending he has power over the dark." A shape began to form near the pulpit. It wasn't a man in a costume. It was a being of shifting shadow and pure malice, its eyes glowing like hot coals. The demon, calling itself Malakor, had been drawn by the constant fear in Oakhaven. It was a feast laid out just for him. With a laugh, he flicked a shadowy tendril at the preacher, sending him flying. Malakor didn't care about souls. He fed on terror itself, and the preacher's cheap tricks were an insult. The villagers were frozen, their pretend fear now replaced by a raw, genuine horror. Hidden in the back, Elara watched. And in the face of this real and terrible power, she was the only one who saw the demon's single, glaring weakness, his suffocating pride. The village was now well and truly haunted. Malakor was a far more terrifying master than any of the preacher's imaginary ghouls. He didn't need to rattle chains or slam doors. His presence was enough. He would appear as a fleeting shadow in the corner of your eye or whisper your deepest fears in your ear as you tried to sleep. The fear he fed on was pure, and he grew stronger every night. The preacher, his faith and his tricks completely shattered, was no help at all. Elara watched as her neighbors withered, eaten away by anxiety. She knew they couldn't fight this thing. It was too powerful. But he was also arrogant. He hadn't just defeated the preacher, he had mocked him. He loved feeling superior. And in that, Elara saw a tiny sliver of hope. You don't fight a bully with your fists when he's bigger than you. You use his own weight against him. Her plan started small. She didn't confront the demon. Instead, she began using the very folklore the village had been taught to fear. She started by leaving small, intricate patterns of salt by doorways. Then came the garlic, not just hung over the door, but braided into complex knots and placed in seemingly random spots all over the village. To anyone else, it looked like a desperate, superstitious attempt at protection. But Elara's placement was deliberate. She wasn't building a fortress, she was setting a stage. She was starting her own rumors, not about a demon, but about an old ritual meant to summon something far, far worse. A challenge to any creature that claimed to rule the night. She was trying to get Malakor's attention. Elara is betting everything on her wits, and the stakes are the entire village. It's a bold and incredibly dangerous strategy. While we see if her gamble pays off, if you're enjoying this story of folklore and cleverness, go ahead and subscribe. We explore tales of tricksters and heroes every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming. Now, let's get back to the showdown. Section 4, The Demon's Game. It worked. Malakor noticed the change. The fear in the village was still there, but now it had an undercurrent of something else, defiant hope. The demon, whose whole identity was based on being the scariest thing around, was intrigued. His nightly torments were getting a little boring, and this was a fun new distraction. He traced the strange patterns of salt and garlic back to their source, the quiet servant girl. One night, he cornered her in the preacher's empty kitchen. "These little charms," Malakor hissed, his voice dripping with amusement. "Do you really believe this folk magic can stop me, child?" Elara forced her voice to stay steady, even as a cold terror gripped her. She looked the demon right in his glowing eyes. "They aren't for you," she said, choosing her words carefully. "They're not meant to ward you off. They're to get the attention of my master." The demon tilted his head. "Master?" "An ancient spirit," Elara lied, her mind racing. "One so old and powerful that it considers beings like you to be pests. It taught me these patterns. They're a call. A challenge." Malakor's amusement instantly curdled into indignation. The nerve of this mortal was insulting. A pest. Him. But his pride was hooked. This was a challenge he simply couldn't ignore. "Summon this master of yours," the demon commanded. "I would be very amused to meet it. You have 3 nights. If your master doesn't show, I will devour not just the fear in this village, but the village itself." Elara had done it. She had the demon's full attention. But in doing so, she had backed herself into a corner. She now had 3 days to summon a spirit that didn't exist, with the fate of everyone she knew hanging in the balance. For 2 nights, Elara put on a show. She drew elaborate, meaningless symbols in the dirt, chanted nonsensical rhymes she made up on the spot, and lit foul-smelling herbs in the village square. It was all for an audience of one. Malakor watched from the shadows, his amusement returning, slowly swelling into smug arrogance. The little servant girl was clearly in over her head. Her rituals were clumsy and powerless. On the 3rd and final night, Elara led the demon to the one place everyone in Oakhaven avoided. The old, abandoned church at the edge of the woods. "My master will only appear on consecrated ground that has been forsaken," she explained, her voice low and serious. The demon, puffed up with his own importance, followed her, ready to watch her fail. Inside the decaying church, in the very center of the room, stood a single object covered by a heavy velvet cloth. "My master is vain," Elara said softly. "A being of immense power and terrible beauty. It will only appear where it can look upon its own form. It will appear in this mirror." She had laid the final piece of the trap. "To summon it," she instructed, "you must stand before it and state your name and your domain. Issue your challenge, and it will answer." This appealed directly to Malakor's massive ego. The idea of announcing his own grandeur to another powerful being was irresistible. He stalked forward, radiating impatience and pride. Standing before the shrouded object, he drew himself up to his full, terrifying height. "I am Malakor, the feaster on fear, lord of this valley," he boomed, the sound shaking dust from the rotten ceiling. "I challenge this so-called master to face me." With a sharp tug, Elara pulled the cloth away. Malakor found himself staring into a large, silver-backed mirror. For a long moment, the demon was confronted not by a rival, but by his own monstrous reflection. A creature that existed only to be feared by others was now forced to look at itself. He roared, a sound of pure fury and humiliation at being so completely fooled. But the mirror was just a distraction. As the demon raged at his own image, Elara kicked over the large basins of oil she had carefully placed around the mirror. She tossed a single, lit candle from her pocket. The ancient, dry wood of the church, now soaked in oil, went up in an inferno. Elara slipped out a back door she had unbarred just moments before. The main doors had been chained shut from the outside. The demon, consumed by his own rage and trapped by fire, was defeated not by holy magic, but by a simple, clever plan and his own unbearable pride. From a safe distance, the villagers watched the old church burn, a brilliant torch against the night sky. They didn't know what had happened inside, only that the suffocating cold that had gripped Oak Haven for weeks was finally gone. As the last embers died down, it felt as though the sun was rising for the first time in a month. Preacher Theron, humbled and shaken, gave up his fake ghost stories. He now had a real one to tell, though he was no longer the hero. That honor belonged to Elara. She, however, never spoke of it. She went back to her duties, as quiet and unassuming as ever, though now she was met with nods of deep respect and knowing smiles wherever she went. The villagers didn't need to know how she did it. They only knew that she had faced the darkness for them and won. And so, the village learned that the greatest weapon against darkness isn't always a holy sword or a sacred prayer, but a sharp mind and the courage to use it. Folk wisdom, often dismissed as simple superstition, can become a powerful tool in the right hands. The story of Elara proved that even the biggest, most terrifying monsters have a weakness, and often, it's their own pride. What would you have done to outsmart the demon? Share your own clever plans in the comments below. And for more tales where wit triumphs over might, make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.